Hello, I'm back again with another video today. It's about my top 10 favorite albums of all time, plus some honorable mentions. I think I'm not bold enough to call that video the best 10 albums of all time, because who am I to decide that? But my favorites at the moment, those things, it doesn't change a lot, or it hasn't changed a lot in the, I could say, last 10, 15, 20 years. If you're a music nerd for such a long time, you usually, at least your top three albums are like, for decades, your top three albums, and some placements might change around a bit. So number 8 today could have been maybe number 12 5 years ago, or number 7 today could be number 18 in 5 years, who knows. But those albums, including the honorable mentions, those are the albums I would say that those are my all-time favorites. First, the honorable mentions. And I'm sitting here, usually my videos I'm doing from this place, this is the table where the camera usually stands. But today I switched it around, because most of the albums I'm going to talk about today you can see on my wall here in the background. This is the wall of fame, so to speak, of some of my all-time favorite albums. Some didn't make it on the wall, and plus some on the wall aren't necessarily my all-time favorite albums. It's also a bit of, do I like the covers, the cover artwork. Some of my favorite albums don't have necessarily favorite cover artwork of mine, so they don't hang on that wall, and vice versa. But some of the albums we're going to talk about today, you can already, it's like a spoiler, you can already see here in the background. But first, the honorable mentions. The first honorable mention you can see on the wall. I don't know if it's going to be very clear to see on the video. Then London Calling by The Clash. Also, the second honorable mention is right below London Calling, is Forever Changes by Love, second Love album. Incredible. Also, Purple Rain. Can you see it in there? Oh no, it's a bit, maybe can you see it now? Purple Rain by Prince is an honorable mention. The Queen is Dead, also on the wall by the Smiths. Then something that's not on the wall, it Comes a Time by Neil Young. It's not one of his classic albums, or not one of his most iconic albums. It's usually not in even Neil Young fan rankings. It's not. I think there's no Neil Young fan who thinks this is a bad album, but it's usually not in the top 3, and often not in the top 5, top 10 maybe. But it's my all-time favorite Neil Young album. Rust Never Sleeps, for example, or After the Gold Rush, of course, are the more iconic ones, and even 2 or 3 others. But I really love Comes a Time. It's a bit of a sequel to Harvest, which was much more successful, but I prefer it very much to Harvest. C'est Chic by Chic is another honorable mention that's not on the wall. Then I can't even read it. Saturday Night Fever by, it's not really by the Bee Gees. This is the only kind of compilation on that list. It's lots of Bee Gees songs, even songs they wrote and other artists on that album perform, but it's not entirely Bee Gees. There are also other artists, like for example Tavares, disco act. But the flow of that movie soundtrack, Saturday Night Fever, also is one of my maybe all-time top 5 favorite movies. Not very politically correct these days, but it's such a powerful movie. It's a different movie than what you came to expect, with all the myth behind it, that it's going to be a lightweight disco movie. It's not that. It's really a gritty new Hollywood film, I would say. And the soundtrack is the best soundtrack in pop music history, in my opinion. And it's a great experience to listen to that album, although there are different artists and not just the Bee Gees. That's all of the honorable mentions. Now the top 10, my top 10 favorite albums as of today. Number 10, definitely maybe by Oasis. Is this my favorite album from the 90s? I guess so. Yeah, I already did a video my top 50, I think top 50 favorite 90s albums, and this was number one. So yeah, there's not going to be any more albums from the 90s, I'm afraid. Definitely maybe Oasis, very important album to me. I said it often on this channel. I'm not really into Oasis that much anymore. They were more like a teenage years youth thing, but they were so important to me, and this is the album I've listened to most often in my life. I would say I haven't listened to it much in the past 20 years, but in the 90s, in the 5-6 years after it came out, this was the album I listened almost daily to. It really informed me as a music fan and as a human being, I would say. Number 9 is Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. The reason, it used to hang on the wall, but then after, one day I said to myself, do I really like the cover? Do I like to look at the cover? And no, this is probably one of my least favorite. It's probably my least favorite Kate Bush album cover, and I really don't like that cover. The way of this is the font. I don't like the font. I don't like these pink colors. I don't like that it's like a passepartout, that it's like a picture in a picture. It's not, and she doesn't really look cool in that cover. This 80s perm kind of hairdo. I'm not really a fan of the album cover, so that's why one of the reasons why it's not on the wall. But the content, the musical content, wow, fantastic album. Side A is almost like could be a greatest hits of Kate Bush, side A, and side B is this very trippy concept, kind of almost avant-garde 80s art pop trip you're taking. Very, very cool album. First side hits, and side B very adventurous. And I enjoy both. I'm a big pop fan, mainstream. I like melodies, I like hook lines, and that's why I say side A is cool to me. And I also really like trippy, weird, more experimental stuff. So this album has both. Number 7 is On the Wall. Again, I'm not sure if you can see it. Maybe I'm in front of it. No, it's over there. Maybe you can see it. Highway 61 revisited by Bob Dylan. My favorite Bob Dylan album. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and I love many phases of his. Also later phases, like the so-called Christian phase. I think his Christian phase lasted from 1962 to 2023 in a way because mythological Christian, Jewish, Judo-Christian symbolism and since the beginning. But there's this Christian phase of the late 70s. I also like this phase. I like Blood on the Tracks. I like his most recent album with Murder Most Foul on it. But if push comes to shove, the classic 65-66 psychedelic folk rock Bob Dylan is probably my all-time favorite Bob Dylan. But great the way he changed throughout his career. The next band, also changed a bit throughout the career, but they're not really famous for changing all that much. But this is my favorite, not just my favorite Rolling Stones album. I think you will see on that list. Yeah, this has to be my all-time favorite pure rock and roll album. This is really a rock and roll album and perfect double album. Mick Jagger isn't the biggest fan of it. I guess he thinks it's a bit overindulgent and many, like leftovers and not really finished songs, not lots of hits. Tumbling Dice, the single from it, is nowadays a Stones classic, but was a bit of an underperformer when it came out. So Mick Jagger, not really dismissed. He can't dismiss a masterpiece like that, but I don't think it's in his top 5 favorite Stones albums. But I love this album, and I have to love this album also because the most popular video on my channel is me visiting the place where they recorded that album. That video has, I think, like 20,000 views now on a small channel like mine. Never understood really why, because it's by far not my best or most interesting video. It was just, I was on holiday and I was there, so I filmed the house where they recorded, Narcot where they recorded Exile Main Street, and I was almost embarrassed to put this video out because it was a nothing video in my opinion, not much information. But for some reason it's by far my most successful video so far. The next album is number 6, A Tabua de Esmeralda. Maybe if you're not from Brazil, maybe the most unknown or most deep cut album on the list. I think if you're from Brazil, you really know that this is a masterpiece. And if you're a fan of Jorge Ben, that's the artist, then you also like it. Unfortunately, I only have this version, which is like the international version, which they called Brother, and which has a very... I don't really like that cover, like with Kate Bush. I think that's not a good cover for such an iconic album. But the one with the original Brazilian cover and the Brazilian title, Tabu de Esmeralda, it's so expensive, these albums, on Discogs. You don't get a decent copy, I think, under 50 euros, but then you have also to bear in mind that most of the sellers would be from Brazil, so with shipping, you can't really get this for under like 80 euros or dollars in a good condition with the iconic great cover. But one day, and I will buy it also for that price. I think I never really could bring myself to push the button to order it. But yeah, this is the not so good cover and not so good title, Brother, but the album, the content, like with Kate Bush, incredible, Tropicalia, folky, also symphonic. It's a bit like Scott Walker, but or Serge Gainsbourg, people like that, were in the late 60s. But with this tropical flavor on top and great songwriting, incredible songwriting. So this is also a kind of a concept album, I think, about esoteric stuff, hermeticism and things like that. It's a fantastic album. I really love it. Number 5 is also on the wall. It's there, you can see it. Lexicon of Love, ABC. Talked about this album in, I think, 2 of my previous at least 10 videos. So this is the 3rd time in 3 of 10 of the most recent videos. Now I've talked about this album, so I keep it short. ABC, Lexicon of Love, my favorite debut album of all time. Also done a video about my favorite debut albums recently. And number 4, again, an album that I've talked about a lot. Whatever's For Us by Joan Armatrading. And this shows you how strange I am or how underprepared I am for these videos. But now, because now I think this was also a debut album and it was just my number 2 in the list of my favorite debut albums, because Lexicon of Love was my number 1. But now I'm saying that this is my 4th favorite album and Lexicon of Love is my 5th favorite album. So maybe you can switch those things around, but that's what I said in the beginning. Don't take the placements that serious. Apart from now, because now are my top 3 favorite albums of all time, and now you can take it serious, the placement, because these placements, number 3, what is number 3, 2 and 1, that hasn't changed since I'm like 10 years old. I was about 10 years old when I finally had all the Beatle albums. I became a Beatle fan when I was 7 or 8 years old, and when I was about 10 or 11 I had all the albums, and from that moment on I decided what my 3 favorite albums, not just by the Beatles but in general, would be. And that belief of mine has never been successfully challenged so far. I would be willing to, if there would be a new release that's better than those 3 albums, and I would be happy to have a new number 3, 2 or 1, because I'm always looking for good new music, but so far this hasn't happened. So my number 3 album is Revolver by the Beatles. My number 2 favorite albums of all time is Rubber Soul by the Beatles. That's there, I think I'm sitting in front of it. Rubber Soul by the Beatles, the British version. I know lots of Beatles fans, especially from America, prefer the American version. I prefer the version the Beatles intended. Revolver, again, is my number 3. And my number 1 album, faithful subscribers of the channel already know it, because I've talked about it, I think, very often now. It's the White Album. I've got several copies, of course, and lots of CDs, all the different CD versions that have been released. The White Album, that's the album that has it all. That's the the Desert Island disc, the perfect Desert Island disc if you're a Beatle fan, and if you're weird like me. I also like the far out stuff like Revolution 9 or Wild Honey Pie on there. Not as songs per se, but in the context of that trip, of the journey that album is. That's really like like an adventure each time you listen to it, and I never get tired of it. Yeah, my favorite album of all time, the White Album. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.